for you as a mortgage broker sitting there saying, hey, how do I develop my skills? How do I future-proof myself? Focus on these areas. And again, if you're saying, well, software, IT, that's not me. I'm a salesperson. I just want to talk to people. I go back to the Rob Macalister article that says, listen, I get it, but these are skills. Like I think sometimes, maybe in the future, this is just me guessing here, developing your own software tools will be like using email. 30 years ago, that's probably what people saying about using email. No, I'm a salesperson. I don't need to use this techie computer stuff that sends electronic mail. I'll just write a letter. But it's like, no, it's about this being a new category that I think anybody can touch. And then if you could touch it and apply it to your specific domain, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for your business. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mortgage Tech Talks. This week, I go through a McKinsey article that I came across this week. It's from March, but I just came across it this week. And there's a few very interesting graphs, 3 specifically that I go through that talks about what's going on with AI in big organizations that McKinsey surveyed over the past year or so. And how do those trends actually apply to the mortgage business? So I answer that question, and I go even further and say, okay, if you're noticing these trends and how they're being applied to the mortgage industry, what can you do as a mortgage broker right now to take advantage of these trends and set yourself up for success in what is a constantly shifting future that we're going into? So if that's a question that you have for yourself, I think this is going to be an episode that's perfect for you. We'll see you on the other side. Okay, so I read a report this week. The report was called The State of AI, How Organizations Are Rewiring to Capture Value. So this is a report by McKinsey. If people don't know McKinsey, it's global management consulting firms. I used to work for a competitor to McKinsey, a place called Kearney. But in any case, these are these big organizations. They go into the Fortune 500 companies and they basically tell them, this is what you should be focused on. This is what you should be thinking about, that sort of thing, and helps them implement and charges big bucks to do it. But part of the service they provide is they also ask companies questions about their organization, and they do that across a lot of big companies, and they put it all together and make these really nice reports, and they make it public, which is great. So I'm going to go through this report. Now, it's from March, so it's a little bit older. The reason I'm talking about it now is because literally I just read it this week. I was doing preparation. I'm going to be speaking at MPC, so if anyone's going to MPC, love to see you there. And I was just doing some research, and this one came across and said, oh, there's some cool things here, cool things that are related to the mortgage market, or at least stats that I was able to apply to the mortgage market. So that's exactly what I'm going to do in this. I'm going to talk about kind of generally some interesting charts that are shown in this report. And then, hey, what does it mean to be a mortgage broker against the backdrop of all of these things that we see here? So let's get into it here. So the very first chart that I'm going to talk about here is a chart that says, or I guess it's described as, what is it here? Business functions in which organizations are regularly using Gen AI by industries. There's a bunch of industry. I'm going to focus, of course, on financial services, which is like the fourth from the right here if you're looking at the video on the screen there, but it's this column here. And that's the one we're in. So kind of ignoring everything else, every single one of these circles in this column represents a different function. So for those of you who aren't seeing circles and just like, what's he talking about here? I'll basically read it out loud. So the idea is they asked a bunch of financial services companies, and then they said, let's start with the first one. They said, I'm going to survey 100 of these financial service companies, probably more of them, but just for the sake of percentages, and say, hey, how many of you are using Gen AI? And the first category is for marketing and sales. Right. So how many of the big companies are using Gen AI for marketing and sales? You can guess, but I'll give you the answer. It's 40%. So for financial services, 40% of all the people who responded to the survey are using Gen AI in marketing and sales. Okay, let's go to the next function, product and or service development. So I guess this would be a little bit more like actually building the mortgage product. So if you're a broker, maybe a little bit less applicable. But the next one, they surveyed everyone and said, okay, 25% of all the respondents said they were using Gen AI to actually produce products, and they go down the list. So I'm not going to go through every single one, but I'll tell you the top ones for financial service. So the number one, yes, was marketing and sales. Okay. Number two was service operations. So I don't know, processing claims if you're insurance, or, actually collecting maybe the payments if you're a mortgage, or getting things signed, things like anything service related, right? So that's next. It was 26%. Next one we already talked about, product and service development. That's 25%, a little less applicable to mortgage brokers. Number 4 was IT at 24%. And then the last one, risk/legal at 21%. And that's an interesting one because across all industries, right, we're going to just focus on financial services, but the chart is actually across many industries. This is the industry that's using risk and legal, Gen AI and risk and legal by far the most. So it's actually something that kind of popped out, which was interesting. And I think anyone in the industry would agree that if we can make that easier somehow, the amount of risk and legal work that we have to do, I think it would be a welcome change. So looking at that, I would say, okay, of all those things here, what does a broker do really? That's really what we're trying to answer with this. And I think what a broker does is, first of all brokers, I think, do, of all those things I said, do three things. They do sales, right? So we talked about marketing, sales, they kind of clump those together, but I'm going to make them separate. So sales, I think absolutely all brokers do. They definitely do. Every single broker does legal. We talked about that. They have to submit their compliance. That's ultimately a legal activity that they have to do. They have to do AML now. They have to do all these types of things. And then service. I think absolutely service, getting things signed, answering questions, helping people make payments, reminding, these are all service related things. And so those are things I think all brokers do. And then some brokers do this next category, which I would say marketing. So remember, I split up sales and marketing. I'd say some brokers do marketing. I don't think all brokers do. I don't think it's an essential skill activity to be a good and successful broker, but a lot of people do and do it really well, and it really helps their business. And then IT, right? I know some people who just literally do their entire mortgage business off the side of their desk with a piece of paper and phone, right? And so there's no real IT there. Others are much heavier, right? They have systems and processes and things, and those are the people we work a lot with at Blue Mortgage, of course. So that's just interesting. I think really the takeaway with this for the first one, this is the easy one, I guess I would say, is that, hey, these are areas where it's kind of being shown on a mass scale that financial services people in this industry are using Gen AI. And I think as someone listening to this, they should really just ask that question for them. They should go through all five of those things I just said. They should say, hey, for sales, am I using Gen AI? Right. And that, honestly, it's not too crazy. It just means if you're sending that follow-up email, maybe getting ChatGPT to take a look at it, right? You don't have to overcomplicate these things. And that's probably what these people are doing too. They're not overcomplicating. It's like, yeah, I sent an email last week and I asked ChatGPT to help me out. I guess that's sales. That's okay, right? I don't want to make this bigger than it is, but at least try to check that box. At least get the snowball rolling. I've talked about that before. You don't have to go big into these types of things, but it's just getting started. So sales, am I using Gen AI or not? Legal, right? Am I helping it with, do my paperwork and do my compliance? Because I think it could be good with that. Service, is it helping me follow up and maybe, again, draft some of those emails as it relates to service? Marketing and IT. So across all those different things, am I using Gen AI? Because ultimately, of course, the more you can do, it's just another tool, right? And you don't want to force it, right? You don't want to say, hey, I want to use Gen AI, so I'm going to find a problem to do it. I think what I'm really kind of saying here is that it's been proven there are problems in financial services that can be helped with Gen AI. And we know what categories they're in. They're the ones we just talked about. And so if you can do that, then great. I mean, if I look down here in financial services, strategy and corporate finance, that's 7%, right? People actually using Gen AI for that. And so I didn't include it because I'm saying that's not a problem. If you're trying to figure out, your strategy, your corporate strategy as a broker, using Gen AI to do it, I wouldn't push too hard on there just yet because, and maybe you find something. I'm not saying it's not possible, but the numbers across many, many organizations are saying that's not where the biggest problems are that AI can solve. It's more in these areas. So again, it's sales, legal, service, marketing, IT. So focus on those areas. That's the first takeaway. The second graph I want to show here, and the same thing, is something called, it says share of respondents finding difficulty in organizations' hiring of AI related roles. So let me share my screen again, just so you can see it, but I'll describe it, of course. So what it is, it's just a list of a bunch of different roles. So a couple on here: translators, data engineers, AI data scientists, software engineers, right? All these different things. And then what you can see is there's a light blue, which says, hey, was it difficult to hire? I'm just going to use design specialist because that's the first one I see here. In 2022, was it difficult to hire a design specialist? And over 60% of people said, yeah, it was. It was very difficult to hire a design specialist. And then they do the 2024 one. They say, okay, same question now 2 years later, because again, maybe design is an area, maybe it's marketing related that AI could help. And it's true. They said, hey, now it's only difficult 40% of the time to hire a design specialist. And the idea, of course, is what? Is that either A, you're getting more efficient with your current design specialists because, the Gen AI is helping, or simply you don't need it, right? Someone else in a different role can do that because they don't need to have a, amazing design eye to maybe just mock up some things that, one of these AI tools can do. And so the idea is that the people who are design specialists, or, I guess you could say supply, right, of this type of role, or the supply demand imbalance is kind of evening out a little bit. I guess you could put it that way. So I won't go through all these here again, but I do want to kind of highlight design specialists, and then that goes in order of like what's been the biggest change. So design has been the biggest change, followed by data visualization specialists, followed by software engineers, prompt engineers, translators, data engineers, AI product managers, machine learning engineers, dot dot dot. So I kind of took a detour for people listening, be like, well, I don't care. I'm a mortgage broker. This is not related to me. Why would I even begin to care about something like this? And you're right. I mean, I look at these types of roles, and really in my mind, I classify these roles as roles needed to, kind of build software products. Design specialists probably need to design a software product, or software engineers, of course, that's needed, or data engineers. These are all like very techie related roles. So we can see that supply demand balance is starting to kind of even out in these types of roles. But again, why, as a mortgage broker, should you care? Why did I even bring this up? And the reason is just coincidentally, Rob Macalister, and if you guys know him, Mortgage Logic News, seen a bunch of his podcasts, and I think he does a lot of good stuff in his articles. He just came out this week, so just coincidentally made me think of this, of an article that says vibe coding. So this is the idea. Vibe coding, long story short, vibe coding is using AI to build software products, is a game changer for techie mortgage pros, right? So this is bringing it all together, right? To say, hey, these software engineers, I guess these software engineering related roles, that's in the other article, aren't as in much high demand because existing people and organizations can just do that type of work. And Rob's basically saying the same thing. For you as a mortgage broker who's listening to this podcast, who's probably into tech, you can start using AI to do vibe coding, right? Which is, again, there's all sorts of pitfalls that come with vibe coding, but it is a thing right now, and it can produce real value. So, going into this, I won't go too deep into this, but he goes in and says, hey, first of all, software is important for this business, of course. And he talks about things like smart applications, calculators, document managers, deal status trackers, chatbots, all these different things that software helps in the mortgage process. But then he went on to say is that up until now, it's been tough. The catch with technology development is that it devours our time, drains budgets, and requires the patience of Michelangelo. I guess Michelangelo was patient. I don't know. And he goes, or at least it did. What I'm about to show you is the single most potent invention in software development this millennium, full stop. And he goes on and on. And so, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? It's saying, okay, I'm looking at this report across all sorts of industries. And yes, it seems that people in organizations can do what software engineers have traditionally done. That's what the report is telling me. And now we're getting literally an article this week, but Rob's saying the same thing, but for mortgage pros and how they can do it. So what does this mean? I mean, I think that, a lot of people get scared about, oh, AI is going to take my job. And we'll get into that in a second, because there's also something in the report that talks about that. But not only, I think, does AI enhance existing jobs, we talked about that, how it can make your service or your marketing or your sales better, but it can open up brand new avenues. That's what's really exciting for me. And that's the optimistic, very optimistic, I think, spin to take on all this AI sort of stuff, which is up until this moment as a mortgage broker, I couldn't just do tech, right? I couldn't, or I had to hire someone who's expensive and prohibitively expensive, but now I can. So that's like super exciting for me because it means that there's new opportunities, new businesses, new ways people can capture opportunity in the market. All you have to do is, I think, just be open to it and be an entrepreneur and go out and try and take these things, right? And so that's between these two things. That's what I'm saying is that as a mortgage pro, you can go out, you could probably start building these types of tools, doing kind of this vibe coding type stuff. And it can have a real impact. So it can open up new avenues, and it unlocks a superpower. And I've talked about this in other podcast where a real superpower is someone who understands the industry deeply in the sense of like they are their own first customer, but also can build the software. And like in all of Canada, of everyone I've ever talked to, it's more often than not one or the other. I know like maybe on one hand, people who like are truly, truly both, like truly brokers and truly can actually build very good software. Like I don't even know, I'm not even in that category because I'm not a broker, right? So there's very, very few people. But my hope is that it's not just one hand anymore. It's going to be hundreds of people who understand it very deeply and can build software, because when you have those two things, that's a superpower and that allows you to accelerate very quickly. Okay, well, let's wrap it up here. The thing that I think a lot of people are talking about is, or thinking about, I should say, the back of their mind is job loss, right? Is AI going to come along and take my job? Well, according to the survey here, I'll bring it up again. It shows by function, so it's not doing by industry, but it is by function, kind of the expected job change across all these different organizations. So the overall, I'll just start with that. Overall, what you're seeing is that 38% of organizations think no change. AI is not going to change anything. If I add this up, about 19% of organizations think it's going to increase the number of jobs. That's interesting. And then I guess about, what is this one? 31% of organizations think it will decrease their headcount. And then 12%, if people are doing the math at home, said not applicable to me. Don't know. So that's interesting, right? So I think that, when I look at this, I say, okay, job loss, I guess, or job decrease makes sense in a way. It's like, hey, I don't need to hire as many people, or I don't need to backfill. I don't need as many people. I have more leverage with my existing people. But the job increase is very interesting. But I think it comes back to what I just said, which is, okay, let's use the same example. Use a mortgage broker who can now code, I don't know, let's say, and you're building amazing software tools. Well, you're just going to be way more productive, right? And as you get more productive, you're going to need to hire people, right? And there's going to be more business going around that needs to be filled. So yes, there are certain roles of actually just, the hardcore developer who's sitting down and with a monster and going out and doing it. But now what you're doing is you're unlocking these mortgage brokers who can build tech. And like I just said, these are people with superpowers who are way, way more productive. And the lesson over time has always been, and again, another very optimistic thing, is that as people get more productive, jobs don't decrease, they increase, because the economics, right, of doing certain activities just gets better and better. And as economics get better, that means you can hire more, and it's just a snowball that runs away, right? And so that's what we're seeing on the increase side, is to say, I'm getting more productive, which means what was previously uneconomical for me to do. I used to have to pay, someone 70 grand and I got 50 grand versus output. I'll just say something like that. Now I'm paying that person 70 grand, but they're way more productive. So that same person is making 100 grand worth of output. Now I can hire more people, right? And then that's the positive side. And just to wrap up, let's apply this to mortgages specifically. So if you remember at the very beginning, we talked about, the different functions that touch mortgage brokers. But let's go through each of them specifically. So marketing and sales, if I look at this chart, I can see that on average, these organizations think that jobs are going to decrease. Interesting. Marketing sales is going down. Service, right? So that service is, okay, this is your mortgage. This is, how you make a payment. This is that sort of thing. Jobs, it's the biggest one in which jobs are actually going down, which kind of makes sense, right? I feel like that is the lowest hanging fruit of just like someone writing in being like, where do I pay? How do I log into my TD portal? It's like, I don't need to do that. I don't need to have a dedicated person doing that. Those would actually probably be good jobs that we don't need anymore. But for all the other functions, remember we talked about 5 at the beginning. So 2 jobs are going down, marketing and sales and service. Okay, interesting. But as we talk about product development, again, that's a little bit less brokers, more just financial services in general. But that one's seen a massive increase, right? So even though Gen AI is being used quite a bit in this space, product development, they're seeing a big, big increase in jobs in this space. So interesting. IT, right? That's another one we said that is big in financial services. That's seeing a job increase. People think IT jobs are going to increase. And software engineering, we talked about that a lot. Again, people across all these industries think that software engineering jobs are just going to increase. Very, very cool. And, so just to wrap it up, I would say, we talked about at the beginning, all five of these functions, you should be using Gen AI to kind of help you out. But as it relates to you and your skills and where you should really be, I guess, dedicating your personal development, I would focus in these areas in which jobs are going to increase, right? Product development, IT, software engineering, knowledge management. Those are the four categories. Now, knowledge management doesn't really apply to our industry, but in this survey, those are the four areas in which people think jobs are going to increase over the next 3 years. So it's short term, right? It's very quick. And so, yeah, for you as a mortgage broker sitting there saying, hey, how do I develop my skills? How do I future proof myself? Focus on these areas. And again, if you're saying, well, software, IT, that's not me. I'm a salesperson. I just want to talk to people. I go back to the Rob Macalister article that says, listen, I get it, but these are skills. Like I think sometimes, maybe in the future, this is just me guessing here, developing your own software tools will be like using email. I mean, 30 years ago, that's probably what people were saying about using email. No, I'm a salesperson. I don't need to use this techie computer stuff that sends electronic mail. I'll just write a letter. But it's like, no, it's about this being a new category that I think anybody can touch. And then if you could touch it and apply it to your specific domain, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for your business and just jobs and the job market in general. So I'll leave it at that. A very interesting report there. I'll include the link in the survey. Rob, if you're out there listening to this, love to have you on. We can chat through stuff like this, of course. And for everybody else, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.